I'm certain this is a New Hampshire crowd. You definitely have questions. Now, if you're in there, you're going to have to speak up if you got a question, so that I know that.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
Since we are a New Hampshire crowd, I think we find ourselves pretty isolated up here in liberal New England sometimes in those sections where we all come from. And we get what I'm looking for with John is I'm hoping that he's going to be a candidate that has a more broader appeal in the rest of the country than maybe someone that gets a tag as a northern liberal, or even the Hillary has quite a connection with that kind of profile. And in addition to the policies that John supports, I'm looking for somebody that's going to win. And though we're all focused on New Hampshire and Iowa right now, I'd really be interested to know what your challenges are in the South or maybe in the West. And do you have and what can we expect in a general election?
I don't know whether you all could hear that question. What it has to do with sometimes if you're in, such a sweetheart, thank you so much. I'll wait till somebody asks a question, and then the next question, then I'll take advantage of that. John's, it's almost an electability question, but you're talking about John's appeal in regions other than Iowa and New Hampshire, and particularly the need when you're in New Hampshire. Sometimes each of us in each of our states are very our state centric. Sometimes is somebody who appeals in fairly liberal electorate in New Hampshire going to also be able to appeal around the rest of the country, because that's going to be the ultimate test. It doesn't do us any good to nominate somebody who's not going to win. We can't, honestly. People say to me all the time, I'm praying for your health. Thank you very much for that, but also pray for Justice Stevens' health, because he's 87 years old, and he stands between us and a Supreme Court that could change the lives of our children. Mm-hmm. My life, I think, has been defined honestly by the legacy of the Warren Court. And it was a single court that changed how we viewed what our civil rights, what rights we were entitled to individually, and changed what happened in our courts. The same thing can happen again with this court. But so we need to be incredibly careful about making certain that we nominate somebody who can win the election, so Justice Stevens, bless his heart, can finally retire. Our daughter worked for NPR this summer, worked for Nina Totenberg, and so she was on the Supreme Court beat, and she said she every day they come out with another opinion, and she'd call distressed about the opinion. And one day she called happy, and I thought, what in the world, did they really do something so really surprising? She said, no, she just heard that Justice Stevens had hired his clerks for the next 2 years. So she was encouraged, but we need to make it easy for him when the time comes to retire. John's appeal, understand that he is the candidate who's won in a red state. He won in North Carolina against an incumbent who was a protege of Jesse Helms, and whose ad people were among the nastiest. Alex Castellanos, well known to be an extremely aggressive consultant and ad maker for Republicans, responsible for those of you, and I'm sure if you're here watching somebody's wife talk, that you must be pretty politically active. You may remember the White Hands ad in North Carolina with the elderly white hand crumpling a pink slip that was done in the Harvey Gantt, Jesse Helms campaign to make a statement with respect to affirmative action and apparently try to scare white North Carolinians into voting against Harvey Gantt, and fear that their jobs would therefore be lost because of affirmative action. That was Alex Castellanos' ad, and he was the ad maker who, on the other side of the lawfare cloth, John Edwards. But John Edwards won there, and the reason he won was because he appealed not just to the traditional Democratic voter, but he appealed across the board in areas that, in some areas that had never voted Democratic, counties that had never voted Democratic in that race, because John spoke to them. He spoke to them in a language that told them, I understand your life, I get what's important to you, and I respect who you are, regardless of where you come from. My dad, his own dad, graduated from high school and went to work for the mill, and John's never known a finer human being in his life than his father, and I have to agree. And so he had a respect for people who sometimes we write off as Democrats as being people who are going to be definitely voting Republican. He was able to speak to these people about the problems that they faced. He does the same thing now as he goes. The reason he has a rural agenda is because he understands that these are people with real problems, and he doesn't write them off. Democrats routinely write off people in rural America. Well, those people are voting Republican, and we can't reach them. Well, why in the world would you do that? I mean, today, who won the Patriots-Bills game? Is it over?
Tonight.
Tonight. Because I got to talk fast then, huh?
Not too late.
But I can,
Not too late.
that's right. But I can promise you that the Patriots are not going to give the Bills a 40-point lead as they step onto the field. They're not going to say you can start with 40 points, but the Democrats do that all the time. You know, we say we're going to concede certain states because we can't possibly win them. In 2004, you know how many ads the Carrie Edwards ticket ran in the state of North Carolina? There's a North Carolina on the ticket, remember. How many ads? None. None. And so we're not going to win a state we don't run any ads in. We're simply not. The Republicans ran ads there, but we ran none. And so not surprisingly, we didn't win North Carolina. Well, we didn't do anything in Tennessee either. Al Gore had lost Tennessee, and if Al Gore couldn't win it and he's from Tennessee, then how in the world did we think we were going to be able to win it? So we didn't. Kansas, you hear Democrats all the time say that is a Republican state. You know, and Thomas Frank wrote a whole book about why they voted Republican. They voted against their economic interests. You know, what's the matter with Kansas? You know, Oklahoma, certainly a Republican state. Oh my goodness, could you find that they wear cowboy hats and boots, and they're certainly a Republican state. And Kentucky, you know, Colonel Sanders, certainly a Republican state. Montana, you know, right up there with Idaho, it's got to be a Republican state too. Every one of those states has a Democratic governor. Every one of them.
Wow.
What does that tell you? It tells you that Democrats can win, but you can never win a game that you don't enter. And you need to go there. And then what do you need to do? You need to talk to people about the issues that are actually important to them. A number of those states, largely rural. If a Democrat comes, you've got no rural agenda, I can promise you they're not going to win the votes there. You have to understand what the problems these people are facing, speak to them with respect. Not, you know, one of the things, honestly, I think, you know, at least in the South, sometimes, you know, when you're talking about the liberal Northeast, I think sometimes the way some Southerners think about it, I don't think about it this way, but some Southerners certainly, you see it in the press sometimes, that people will say, you know, there's those Northeasterners, that, you know, so they've got all those Ivy League schools up there and everything, they look down on us. And as long as they have that view, nobody ever votes for somebody who doesn't respect them. You know, so that's also one of the important ingredients. John clearly respects every person who works with their hands. That would include his father. It would include his brother, who's an electrician, works for works for IBEW. And he has this a level of a way of treating people that starts out with the possibility that he wins their vote, as opposed to the impossibility of ever convincing them to get there. So it's both the way he'll campaign and where he'll campaign is going to make, I think, all the difference in the world. Not just for winning the White House. And I understand that winning the White House is enormously important, but we're talking, every candidate here talking about pretty aggressive agendas. If you want to get them passed, you're going to need to win those down ballot races too. And those down ballot races are going to mean that we're going to have to be present in those states, making a financial commitment to campaigning there and making a commitment to charging up the troops in a sense. And John has an enormous capacity to do that. I don't think, you know, I realize we've got some great speakers in this campaign. I don't think we have any better speaker in terms of firing up people, getting people really excited and motivated.